The tension did not ease with time. It thickened, quietly, almost methodically, as if the absence of resolution itself became the fuel. Because once a narrative like this escapes the confines of a police report and enters the bloodstream of mass media, it no longer behaves like a normal investigation. It evolves. It absorbs personalities, reputations, histories, grudges, and fears. And in this case, it absorbed grief. Charlie Kirk was not an anonymous figure. He was a recognizable face, a voice, a brand. To supporters, he represented conviction and consistency. To critics, he represented something else entirely. What matters here is not agreement or opposition, but visibility. His death was never going to pass quietly, and everyone involved understood that, even if they underestimated the consequences. From the beginning, the official account presented a version of events designed to anchor the public: a suspect in custody, a stated motive, physical evidence cataloged. Prosecutors described a young man who, according to messages later released, believed he was acting against hatred. The language was stark, but the structure was familiar: a lone suspect, a contained act, a courtroom to follow. But for a certain segment of the audience, that structure felt insufficient, not because of contradictions in the filings, but because of a growing cultural reflex, the belief that visible crimes must have invisible architects. That reflex has been shaped over years by scandals that were, in fact, hidden, by institutions that did lie, by moments when skepticism was justified. The danger is what happens when that skepticism becomes automatic, when every answer is assumed to be false by default. Candace Owens did not invent that reflex, she stepped into it, and by doing so, she amplified it. Her listeners were not hearing a detached analysis. They were hearing certainty framed as courage, doubt framed as clarity. Each rhetorical question implied knowledge just out of reach, just one more episode away. The refusal to accept closure became itself the message. What complicates this further is Owens's proximity to the world she questioned. She once worked within the same political ecosystem. She knew the personalities. She understood the internal dynamics. To her supporters, that proximity lent credibility. To her critics, it created an ethical conflict, one where personal grievances and professional incentives blurred. Erica Kirk found herself trapped in that blur. Every attempt to correct the record seemed to generate new angles of suspicion. When she provided documentation, it was framed as preparation. When she declined to elaborate, it was framed as avoidance. When she appeared on television, her demeanor was dissected frame by frame. Calm was interpreted as calculation. Emotion was interpreted as performance. This is the quiet cruelty of public speculation. It converts ordinary human responses into alleged signals. There is no correct way to grieve under a microscope. Behind the scenes, Turning Point USA faced its own reckoning. Staff members, many of whom had known Charlie Kirk personally, watched as their names circulated online, paired with insinuations they had no opportunity to answer. For them, the accusation was not abstract. It arrived in threats, in messages, in a sense that loyalty itself had become suspicious. And yet, every denial only seemed to reinforce the narrative that something was being hidden. This is the paradox of conspiracy-driven discourse. The absence of proof is not a weakness, but a feature. Silence becomes evidence. Transparency becomes choreography. Owens's insistence that international actors might be involved pushed the story beyond domestic politics and into geopolitical imagination. France, Israel, Egypt, each mention carried historical weight. It sidesteps accountability. Nothing is directly claimed, everything is merely suggested, and suggestions travel far faster than retractions. If you value careful reporting that slows these moments down instead of accelerating them, turning on notifications helps you follow developments as they actually unfold, not just as they trend. The legal system, meanwhile, remained unmoved by the noise. Prosecutors prepared theirs. Defense attorneys prepared theirs. A judge would eventually rule on admissibility, credibility, relevance. None of that process was influenced by podcast episodes or reaction videos, but public perception was. This gap between what the court evaluates and what the audience consumes is where unease settles in. Because when the public decides the verdict before testimony begins, justice becomes secondary to narrative satisfaction. Some supporters of Owens argued that even if her theories were wrong, asking questions was better than complacency. Others countered that questioning without standards is not investigation, it is performance. The difference lies not in curiosity, but in discipline. Megyn Kelly's involvement highlighted another uncomfortable truth. Even critics of speculation feel pressure to intervene when a story threatens to fracture an entire movement. Her attempt to mediate suggested recognition that the damage was no longer theoretical, it was happening in real time. And still, the audience waited for proof, for contradiction, for something definitive. Instead, what they received were promises, future episodes, upcoming revelations, threads left deliberately loose. Each delay stretched attention, keeping the story alive without resolving it. In the economy of influence, suspense is currency. You can see this tension reflected in the comment sections, where frustration and loyalty coexist. Some viewers expressed exhaustion, others doubled down. The community fractured into camps defined not by facts, but by trust. Trust in institutions, trust in personalities, trust in one's own instincts. Charlie Kirk's name, once associated primarily with political activism, now carried the weight of this unresolved conflict. His legacy became contested ground, not because of what he did in life, but because of how his death was interpreted. And Erica Kirk remained at the center of it all, whether she wanted to or not. Every appearance risked reigniting speculation. Every silence risked being misread. Her attempt to move forward, to focus on events her husband helped build, was framed by some as avoidance, by others as strength. What no one could deny was this: the tragedy had expanded far beyond the original act. It now encompassed questions about influence, responsibility, restraint, and the ethics of audience-driven storytelling. As long as those questions remain unanswered, the case does not rest. It lingers in feeds, in forums, in conversations late at night where certainty feels comforting and doubt feels dangerous. And somewhere between a courtroom waiting for its day and a microphone waiting for its next episode, the story continues to unfold, shaped not only by what is proven, but by what people choose to believe, repeat, and reward.